Hey guys, what's up, it's iPhone here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the top 15 secondary weapons that I recommend you go and get in Warframe in 2024. Now, I by no means are saying that these are always going to be the most optimal secondary weapons and the most optimal build, because like with everything in Warframe, it definitely depends on the content that you're doing. These are just weapons that I recommend you go ahead and get because they're going to get you through most of the content in the game and also enable you to, make use of different types of playstyles and stuff like that. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Just keep in mind this list is in no particular order, and here at number 15 we have the Laetum. Now you can go ahead and pick the Laetum up from Cavaliero in the Chrysalith after the Angels of the Zariman quest. I'm running a build which looks a little bit like this. Now you might look at this and say, that's kind of a weird build. Where's the crit chance and where's the crit damage and all that there type of stuff? See, the thing with this weapon is it's got an Incarnon perk which gives it an additional 2000% damage on non-critical hits, so it's kind of busted. So we spawned in our heavy gunner enemies here, and if we go ahead and we land headshots, you can see the Incarnon bar gets filled up, and then if I go ahead and middle mouse button at full charge, it transforms the weapon. We hold down left click, and as you can see, everything basically dies extremely quick, and this is because the amount of damage that you're dealing per bullet is actually extremely high with the Laetum because of that last Incarnon perk. Just to let you guys see the other evolutions, so evolution 2 I've got Rapid Wrath, evolution 3 I've got Lethal Rearmament, Evolution 4, I've got Elemental Access, and then of course I've got Devouring Nutrition on Evolution 5. Up next we have the Occucor. Now to make this weapon any good, you need to get the Sentient Surge mod, so it's basically like an augment mod for this weapon specifically, and what this does is it's going to refill the magazine and give you bonus status chance and critical chance while you hold down left click, so it's quite powerful. You can go ahead and copy the build that I'm rocking for this thing. So on its own, the Occucor isn't the most damaging weapon in the world, but I'm going to be using Saren's ability to go ahead and buff up the damage, as well as Rhino's Roar. We go ahead and we hold R1, we activate R3, and we press R4. Now we hold down left click, and as you can see, as I get kills, it actually spawns in these lines which basically just keep on going to all the enemies, and yeah, everything dies and I can just keep on holding down left click. If I spawn in another group of enemies, just so you guys can see again, once you sort of ramp up the damage, it just sort of stays there and everything dies super fast. Now, I know some people are going to be like, man, you need to show this without the buffs and stuff like that, but that's not how people are playing Warframe. You're playing Warframe with the buffs. On its own, the weapon doesn't deal a lot of damage. As you can see, you really need to find a way to get those initial kills off for the weapon to really ramp up in damage. So having the likes of armor strip or damage buffing to increase the amount of damage that you do is definitely the way to go, and then this thing turns into just an enemy shredding machine. The thing with this augment mod though, it came from Nora's mix, so you have to wait for it to come back if it ever comes back. So it's currently going for about 200 platinum on the market. If you're someone who is fluent in Warframe market trading and stuff like that, you can get this quite easily, but if you struggle with trading platinum or you don't have any platinum at all, this might not be the weapon for you, but it's definitely good enough to make this list. Next up, we've got the Furis Incarnon. Now, a big shout out to my friend Suriname for actually shipping me over this footage, because I haven't got access to my own Furis Incarnon yet, because I'm going to have to wait 5 weeks for it to come into rotation in the circuit, but I still wanted to include it on this list and get it out to you guys as soon as possible because the weapon is extremely strong. You just go for a nice like viral heat build or something along those lines. You go ahead, shoot the enemies a little bit, turn on the Incarnon mode, and as you can see, it turns into a beam which just melts all the enemies around. Next up, we have the Lex Prime Incarnon. So on my Evo 2, I've got Hoplite Virtue. Evo 3, I've got Extended Volley. Evo 4, I've got Critical Parallel. Here's the build that I'm running. What you want to do is you want to come in, headshot the enemies a little bit to build up that Incarnon mode. Go ahead, activate the Incarnon mode, press left click, and you just shoot out this big beam which deals a lot of damage, deals a lot of slash procs, orange crits, all that there good stuff. All you have to do is shoot the enemies like once or twice and they're just going to die. Next up, we've got the Prisma Angstrum Incarnon. So on my Evo 2, I've got Paladin Virtue. Evo 3, I've got Rapid Reinforcement. Evo 4, I've got Critical Parallel. Here's the viral heat build that I'm running. You want to do more or less the same thing with the Prisma Angstrum. Run on in, hold down left click, hit the enemies, turn on the Incarnon mode. Now just aim for the head. You've got that primary or secondary deadhead on, and what you're going to see whenever you finally get a kill on headshot is the damage goes up significantly and you just start ripping through all of the enemies. The bullets from the Incarnon form also ricochet, so that's quite cool as well. Next up, we have the Lato Vandal Incarnon, and on my Evo 2, we have Heaven Foray, so that increases damage by 22 of Overshield, so you need to have Overshields active in this case, and increase damage by 40. We've got Evolution Free, Avoids Guidance, so increases accuracy and reduce recoil by 50. And then Death Trap Trigger, so on equip from primary, increase critical chance by 38%, and increase critical damage multiplier by 2.6 for 4 seconds. So I need to be swapping between my primary weapon and my Lato Vandal to get the most out of this gun. So the method that most people are going to use to get Overshield is actually using Pillage, so that's what we're going to use in today's demonstration. Also, here's the build that I'm running on the Lato Vandal Incarnon. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use Pillage, and then I'm going to go to my primary, swap to my secondary again, land some headshots, turn on the Incarnon mode, and just go ahead, left click, swap between my weapons again to keep my buff up. And as you can see, orange crits, red crits, ricocheting bullets, all that there cool stuff. Basically every enemy dies. Incarnon mode one more time, just go ahead, left click, swap in between the primary and the secondary, and all the enemies are dead. Next up, we have the Epitaph. Now, the reason that the Epitaph is on the list is because it is a really good primer. Basically, what a primer is, it's a weapon that you're going to be using to spread a lot of status effects to a lot of enemies. Now, the reason that you want to spread a lot of status effects to a lot of enemies is if you're taking advantage of a mechanic called Condition Overload. Condition Overload is a mod on melees, and it can be a mod on guns as well. And basically what it does is it gives you more damage per status effect applied to enemies. So if we take a look at our trusty Kronen Prime here, we see that we have a build which has Condition Overload on it. And basically the idea of this Epitaph build is you just equip it, press the fire a few times, and then every single enemy is going to have a bunch of status effects. And because I'm using melee, I'm using secondary dexterity for more combo duration. But it's worth noting that there are other arcanes that you can run for better priming, such as secondary encumber. So it says on status effect, 24% chance to trigger a second random status effect, which basically means more status effects applied and more damage from Condition Overload. So what I'm going to do with the Epitaph is go ahead, spam it a little bit, and now I can go ahead and start meleeing, and that's going to increase the amount of damage that I'm dealing with my melee just because all the enemies are primed. Then I can just go ahead, prime them a little bit again, and just keep on meleeing, and that's them basically all dead. You can also run a single target sort of like one-shot, two-shot build with the Epitaph, which looks like this. So in this case, you want to go ahead and fully charge the left click on the Epitaph and just let go whenever you're aiming at the head. Now we're going to have to get some kills to build up our secondary Merciless here so we can deal more damage. You could also run Deadhead if you really wanted to, but because a lot of the damage comes from slash procs, secondary Merciless is more consistent. And as you can see, it's just high single target damage. You can take down, you know, high value targets quite easily with this build. Finally, with the Epitaph, we have a trash clearing build. So this is just to kill big groups of enemies that you're kind of just sick of dealing with. So this build absolutely sucks versus the higher level enemies in the game. So for example, you can see that we're not dealing any damage versus these level 215 Steel Path Heavy Gunners. But if we go ahead and we spawn in the Lancer units, which are the lighter units, we're dealing more damage per shot, and this is without any buffs or Warframe abilities active, and just my companion sort of priming them as well. It doesn't kill extremely quick, but like if you just want to go ahead and shoot it down when you have your buffs up, then you're going to kill all the smaller enemies, so you can just focus on the bigger enemies while also priming them as well. Next up, we have the Kuva Nukor, and we also have a primer build for this as well. Now, the reason that we're running a primer build on the Kuva Nukor is because you can get it with base magnetic damage, so it's basically just another element on it, so you can, you know, get more bonuses on your Condition Overload whenever you shoot with the Kuva Nukor. Priming with the Kuva Nukor looks a little bit like this. You just want to hold left click and wiggle your mouse around a little bit. Now you start meleeing, and all the enemies, once you build up your combo and your crit chance and all of their stuff, they're going to eventually die because you're dealing bonus damage because of all the different elements applied, and every single enemy, apart from that last guy, was dead. We've also got a crit heat DPS build, which takes advantage of Cascadia Flare, which is going to increase our damage per heat status effect applied, stacking up to 480% extra damage. It's maybe not the best to run this build while we have magnetic on this Kuva Nukor, but it's going to work just fine anyway. So if we go ahead and we spawn in these heavy gunners and we hold down left click, you can see that our damage is going to start to ramp up as we apply those heat procs, and you can actually see that 480% bonus up there beside all of my buffs in the right hand or top right hand side of the screen. And you can see that, you know, the enemies die pretty quickly, and you build up a ton of heat procs incredibly quick with this build. Again, it could be more damaging if you had a better base element on the Kuva Nukor, so you have to go through the entire process of killing another Kuva Lich. But those of you who have full-time jobs and stuff like that, getting more than one Kuva Nukor is probably a pain in the butt, so I wouldn't really bother, especially when this is the results anyway with the magnetic one. You're really nitpicking if you go for anything that is more optimal than this, in my opinion. But because we have that base magnetic on, it begs the question, can we make a really good Corpus Killer build with this? And you definitely can. It's just this time we can't run Cascadia Flare. We have to run Secondary Merciless. So I've went ahead and I've spawned in some Corpus Tech enemies. So here's the results with the Corpus Magnetic build. Of course, when you get your first kill, you start your Secondary Merciless stacks and you deal more damage as you get more kills, although they're good stuff, and all these enemies die extremely quick. They did mention on a dev stream recently that they're going to be buffing up magnetic damage, so this build is going to get even better. Moving on to another priming weapon, this is the Kompressa. So this is Ureli's signature weapon, which is actually a really good primer and a really good damage dealing weapon in one. So on this build, I'm running Cascadia Empowered, and it's not even a maxed out one, but the results of this are actually kind of crazy. So it says on status effect, it deals plus 350 damage, matching the damage type of the status effect. And then at max rank, it's plus 750 damage, matching this damage type of the status effect. So basically, you throw on the elements that you want to deal damage with, and this Cascadia Empowered Arcane is just going to amplify that even more. So just take a look at how strong this thing is. I just hold down left click, and look, it just kills them pretty much in no time. Now, it's not the best in the world, but for not having a maxed out Arcane, those are some pretty good results, and it takes this weapon from being like a meme, just kind of mid-tier primer, to being like a really good primer and really good damage dealing weapon as well. Really good 2-in-1 weapon for priming and just dealing a buttload of damage to VIP targets. And I guess it's also fun because I guess, you know, you're shooting bubbles. Mine's kind of look like fart bubbles because I'm playing Saren, but yeah. Next up, we have the Akarius Primes. This is Gauss Prime's signature secondaries, and to be honest, they're not the most damaging weapons in the world, but they're good for general content whenever you just have to kill a ton of mobs very quickly. What you could do is you could go ahead and take off Primed Expel for Prime Fulmination for a higher blast radius, because it is kind of an explosive weapon. And all you want to do is find the enemies that you want to kill and just go ahead and keep on holding left click. Now, the reload speed could be buffed up, the magazine size could be buffed up. It's really down to you what you want to do with the Exilus slot, or what abilities you want to run to, you know, make this gun a little bit more efficient. But, you know, it can kill a lot of like high level enemies quite quickly, but the ammo efficiency is quite bad. Reload speed, in my opinion, is quite bad, but it's still good for just getting a lot of general content, and especially lower level content, done super fast. Next up, we've got the Despair Incarnon. So on the Despair Incarnon, I'm running Fatal Affliction, Swift Deliverance, and Critical Parallel. And for this Arcane, you can run Cascadia Flare or Secondary Deadhead. It's entirely down to you which one you want. I like Cascadia Flare because I'm running Viral Heat and it's a little bit lazier, but you can definitely get a lot of damage from Secondary Deadhead. But with the Despair, you gotta go ahead and aim for those headshots to build up the Incarnon mode. And you can actually see the amount of damage that we deal base just by hitting the head is quite high. Now we turn on the Incarnon mode and it turns them into sort of explosive weapons. And yeah, you just deal a ton of damage. Kind of like the Akarius Prime, except you have to be hitting those headshots with the regular form to, of course, get the explosive form. It is a little bit faster, and you do have unlimited ammo with the explosive form, implying you're able to, you know, keep on landing those headshots with the normal form. But yeah, very ammo efficient, very easy to use, lots of damage, pretty good weapon. Next up, we have the Grimoire. Now, I had to include this one on the list because it is a pretty good weapon, and on top of that, like, you know, you can do some armor stripping stuff with the Canticle mods and stuff like that. On top of that, you also get it from just the main story quests in the game, so everyone is eventually going to have this. So I'm running Primary Deadhead on this build, so you have to be aiming for those headshots if you copy this build. We're running Viral and Electric because Electric is built into this weapon, so if I wanted to add Viral and Heat, the Heat would combine with the Electric to make Radiation, and that's okay in some circumstances, but for just sort of general use, Viral Electric is kind of the recommendation. So as you can see, we have this bar beneath my crosshair, and that's basically the indicator for my alt fire. So I can go ahead, press middle mouse button, and I let out this wave, which is going to apply Viral and Electric and deal damage over time, kinda. But then what I want to be doing is holding down left click while aiming for the head. Now, it's not the most damaging weapon in the world to begin with, but once you eventually get a kill by hitting the enemy's head, the damage goes up quite significantly, and you can also throw in those alt fires there for that damage over time too. That's my second headshot kill that I just got. I'm moving on to my third headshot kill. And then this is basically the max potential that you're going to be getting out of the Grimoire. So we cast that alt fire there, and we go ahead and we hit the head. You can see that we're dealing a lot more damage per headshot now than we were beforehand. So it takes a little bit to ramp up, but this is a good sort of like entry weapon to get you into like Steel Path content, for example, or arbitrations, or whatever you happen to be struggling with. You could like increase the fire rate or something like that. It's really down to you. I just tried my best with this build to sort of put together something that, you know, is usable for people who, you know, just want to mod their book and don't want to get rid of it because it was a free weapon that was given to them. So it's not the quickest at killing large groups of enemies, but it's definitely good at killing, you know, those VIP targets, especially whenever you've built up all those secondary deadhead stacks. Which, keep in mind, that's going to be a lot easier because there's going to be squishier enemies in your missions like Lancer enemies. You're not always going to be dealing with heavy gunners like I am in this example. The only other downside, in my opinion, is the fact that it's kind of hard to aim with. You can see like the big particle explosions just makes it hard to constantly be hitting the head. But if you wanted to, you could swap out secondary deadhead for secondary merciless. It's entirely down to you. But just keep in mind that this Jahu Canticle, so it says killing enemies reduces the armor and shields of other enemies within affinity range by 5%. So it's not the most powerful mod in the world, and you could replace it for a different Canticle mod. Honestly, the Lock Canticle kind of sounds good. You do actually get that bonus fire rate, even though the mod says it's only for allies. And keep in mind that demonstration that we just did with the Grimoire was with no armor strip and no damage buffing abilities active. So if we go to reduce the enemy's armor and buff our damage up a little bit with our abilities, what you'll see is that we deal far more damage per shot, and now the weapon doesn't look as bad, does it? And honestly, who is playing Warframe without their abilities? Next up, we're moving on to the Vasto Prime Incarnon, and on this I'm running Lone Gun, Extended Volley, and the Commodore's Fortune. This is the build that I'm running on Vasto Prime. We've got secondary Deadhead on this time as well. So this is probably one of the weaker Incarnon weapons, but it still is really good. So again, you want to go ahead and be aiming for the head to be building up that Incarnon juice. And then you go ahead and you activate your Incarnon mode, and it turns it into Cassidy's Fan the Hammer from Overwatch. So you just want to, again, keep on aiming for the head and try to be getting those kills by getting the headshots to build up your secondary deadhead. And as you can see, you build up the Incarnon form quite quickly, so all you have to do is just keep on hitting the head, and you're going to deal a lot of damage with this weapon. It's single target, so you're not killing a ton of enemies at a time, but that's okay whenever it comes to dealing to those, or with those VIP enemies, you know what I mean? You see a mix of like orange crits and red crits and stuff like that when you're using this weapon, so there's some red, there's some orange. It's an okay gun, it's just not an Incarnon weapon I would prioritize over the others, because the others can kill bigger groups of enemies quite faster. Next up, we've got the dual Toxocyst, so we've got Fevered Frenzy on Evo 2, we've got Marksman's Hand on Evo 3, and we've got Commodore's Fortune on Evo 4. Then for our build, we've got a Viral Slash build. We've also got a Red Crit build. I'm going to use the Viral Slash build for today's video. So what you want to do, you want to spawn in the enemies, go for the headshots, activate the Incarnon mode. Now hold down left click, keep on going for those headshots, and watch as all the enemies just die. Last but not least, we have the Atomos Incarnon. And on this, I'm running Hoplite Virtue, Moonrise Velocity, and Elemental Balance. Here's the build that I'm running on the Atomos. We've got Cascadia Flare in the Arcane slot. You want to go ahead, be aiming for the head here to build up the Incarnon juice. Go ahead, activate the Incarnon mode, and now you have this insanely powerful cannon, which is just going to melt everything, and it bounces backwards quite a bit. The only finicky part is actually building the Incarnon mode back up again. Sometimes it builds up quickly. It just depends on the enemies that are in your mission, whether or not it is super quick. And as you guys could see, I actually had to spawn in another group of enemies because we killed those so fast. So let's just go ahead and shoot down on them with the Incarnon mode. And you can see the amount of damage that this thing deals. It's actually kind of a nuts weapon. And I'm surprised I haven't seen more people talking about the Atomos Incarnon, because I definitely prefer this one over the Prisma Angstrum, but they're both still really good. And that's pretty much it for the top 15 secondary weapons in Warframe. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead, hit like. If you want to see more Warframe content from me, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.